So, good morning students, and welcome to today's lecture, which is lecture number 7 in our series of the course Project Stakeholder Management. As announced last week, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about the specific types of stakeholders. And as you know, there are different ways of categorizing stakeholders, like primary or secondary or internal, external. I'm going to use the categorization scheme of David Cleland and Lewis Ireland, which I had already discussed in one of the previous classes. So let's get started for today's class. And I refer again to this slide over here, which I had already showed you, the primary stakeholders in a project, which can be very numerous indeed. Of course, it depends on the nature of the project, but on a more larger scale, more complex project, typically these are the types of specific stakeholders which you can expect to encounter. For instance, the corporate shareholders. This is if you have a business organization, commercial organization, which is owned by the shareholders. As the owners of that organization, they have a big stake in the projects which that organization is undertaking, of course. Some projects are of such a nature that they can make or break organizations. If they come out with a failed product, for instance, for which there is little to no demand on the market and for which a very vast sum of money has been invested, well, that can have very bad implications for the commercial organization. And that is why, of course, the corporate shareholders would be very concerned. They would have a high interest, a high stake in such projects. What we will be looking at in today's class is some of the stakeholders which are given over here. There are so many stakeholders, of course, that it's not possible to go into each and every one of them. We will pick some of them out. For instance, we'll be talking about senior management, we'll be talking about the project sponsor, the project board steering committee, and for that I have brought a couple of documents along, taken from actual projects, which I'm going to show you. The program or project management office, that is a whole subject in itself, a whole course module in itself, which would come under project governance, and which we will not be discussing over here, but they have a very big stake in projects. And most organizations, especially most of the larger organizations nowadays, whether they are commercial organizations or public sector organizations, they have got program or project management offices in some form or the other. Program manager or chief project officer. It's also instructive perhaps to know the difference between a project and a program. We have sometimes used the two terms interchangeably in this course. A program actually is a collection of interrelated projects. So projects which are related with each other. For example, the space program, which is very long running and which have many projects under it. For example, development of vehicles for moving around on other planets, development of high-powered telescopes, development of space shuttles and systems, and so forth. These are all individual projects which would come under the framework of such a program. Functional and resource managers, these are very important in organizations. Functional departments, as you know, all kinds of departments, accounting, finance, human resources, administration, IT, etc. Especially in projects which cross functional lines in organizations, functional resource managers have a very big stake. Of course, there is our old friend, the project manager. You know, many of you probably will aspire to be project managers later on in life. Well, that comes with experience, that comes with time, that also comes with ability. It's not something that you can learn in a course or learn in a degree how to become a project manager. What such courses, what such degrees can equip you with is the knowledge, is the insights, but actually becoming a project manager, having the ability to work as a project manager, that will come with experience, with time, working on a lot of projects. Other stakeholders which come under the primary category in the sense of Cleland and Ireland, the project team, very important, the project team which works under the project manager. Project partners, if you have a project in which different organizations collaborating with each other. Project client and the users, the project customers. Of course, these are very important because the projects are basically made for them. They set the requirements, they set the specifications, they set the goal, and of course one has to ensure that one satisfies one's clients or one's users or one's customers. The project input suppliers and vendors, you have them on all larger projects, even on smaller ones, and they can provide a lot of inputs, and it's very important to manage them properly and to ensure that the inputs they are giving are according to specification, they're according to requirement, and so forth. Project contractors and subcontractors. On construction projects, you have a contractor, and you can have any number of subcontractors which are providing specialized services, all kinds of things over there, so that they are very important stakeholders. If they don't do their work according to expectation, well, then you have trouble with your project. You would have invested a lot of funds in your project, and you would not be getting the desired output. Then you have project advisors, project consultants, and consultants, they can be individual consultants providing specialized services, or they can be whole organizations, management consultancies, project management consultancies, which are managing a whole mega project. You have project financiers who are providing the funds for your projects. There is a tendency that projects are becoming more and more costly, especially larger ones. Huge sums of funds are required, and there's also growing competition for funds. So one has to really manage these financiers in such a way that they can be convinced to provide the funds and to sustain funding for your projects. Then, of course, last but not least, there are government entities, state entities, which could be at the national or federal level, at the provincial or state level, at the local, at the district level, which are providing all kinds of inputs, all kinds of services, permissions, concessions, etc. for your project. All of these are stakeholders, of course, and they have to be managed very carefully too. So as you can see, typically on a larger project, you have a very large number of primary stakeholders, and we have defined primary stakeholders in the sense of Cleland and Ireland as those stakeholders which have a contractual or legal obligation towards the project and the authority to commit or manage resources, those which are very closely tied in to the framework of your project. Okay, so now that we have seen which are the main specific types of primary stakeholders which you can expect to encounter on projects, then let us continue over here, and let us just go into one or two basic things which we have to look at before we are going into the specific stakeholders and looking at their various interests and relationships vis-a-vis with regards to projects. Every stakeholder, as you know, has by definition some interest in a project. It can be one interest, it can be multiple interests. Interests are multidimensional. For example, it can be economic, financial, social, archaeological, environmental, ecological, you name it. Any stakeholder has to have some interest, and this can be one interest, can be two interests, can be three interests, can be many different interests. The challenge for project stakeholder management and engagement is to comprehensively identify and carefully analyze all these diverse interests and then come up with practical strategies and measures that seek to ensure that these interests are safeguarded or conflict to the minimum possible extent. We want to avoid conflict. We want to safeguard people's interests, because if stakeholders perceive that their interests are somehow going to be negatively affected by a project, well, then they may have a tendency to oppose, to resist that project. And from a project perspective, we don't want stakeholders to resist our project. We want them to support or facilitate our project. And in order to do that, We have to look at their interests, understand their interests from their perspective, not only from our perspective, and we have to try and ensure that their interests are also safeguarded so that we can avoid any possible conflict which may occur therefrom. Now, looking at the specific stakeholders, and I've just given a long list of these stakeholders, let us start first with senior management. Senior management, as the term already hints, it is the top management of an organization, whether it's a commercial organization, whether it's a public sector organization, whether it's a non-governmental organization, but the senior management is at the top echelon of the administration, of the management of that organization. Well, why is senior management interested in projects? Why does it have a stake in projects? Well, it comes from the function of the senior management. Senior management is those who are ultimately responsible for the organization's performance and accomplishment of its mission and key goals and objectives. Every organization has or should have a mission. It should know where it is going. In order to realize this mission, it has to have objectives, it has to have goals, and of course in order to realize these objectives, realize these goals, it has to have strategies. And projects, programs, these are one of the means which are used in their strategies in order to accomplish their goals and their objectives. To a large extent, this achievement of the mission, achievement of the goals, achievement of the objectives depends on the choice of projects and programs which the organization selects and implements. Of course, projects and programs, they have to be consistent with the objectives, consistent with the goals, consistent with the mission of the organization. They have to add value to the organization. They have to help it along its way of achieving its mission. Now, any organization can have potentially a very, very large number of programs and especially projects. Now, who is responsible for selecting these projects and programs? Well, obviously, it is those who have responsibility for achieving the mission, goals, and objectives, and that is ultimately the senior management. So, by extension, they have responsibility for ensuring that the correct projects and programs are pursued. Without the interest, without the encouragement, and without the sustained support of senior management, projects run a higher risk of failure. Basically, what this means is that it is the senior managers who are or should be periodically monitoring, periodically evaluating the projects and programs and lending support to them if they perceive them as being of value to the organization. If there is no interest or if the senior management does not demonstrate any commitment to the projects, to the programs, well then those who are actually doing the projects and programs, you know, at the ground level, who are doing the sort of daily project program related work activities, they also tend to lose interest. They feel discouraged because they see that this element of appreciation, this element of recognition is not being conveyed to them. Senior management's interests in shaping project program portfolios, and I pointed out a portfolio is a collection of projects, it's a collection of programs. Senior management interests in shaping project portfolios would typically include various types of incentives, for example financial, material, reputational, and they have other interests in that. What I meant to say was that the senior management, they have got different interests in project and program portfolios, and these could be financial, and these could be material, these could be reputational, and there could be other interests. Senior management has got many functions to perform with regards to projects and programs. Senior management also is responsible for creating a culture within their organizations which appreciates, which recognizes the role of projects and programs as what I term mission attainers. As I pointed out, there is a direct relationship between projects and programs through strategies, through objectives, through goals, and ultimately to the mission of the organization. And there are many things, many framework conditions which actually are required, in order for projects and programs to realize their full potential as mission attainers. And that is where senior management also comes in. They have to create the framework conditions. They have to create the infrastructure. They have to create the culture, which is very important in organizations. Senior management can facilitate projects immensely by creating informational infrastructures, process infrastructures, technological infrastructures, institutional structures, administrative structures, which are supportive of projects, programs in their organizations. Project managers, project team managers cannot really do this. This is the function of senior management. It's a sort of a broader, holistic role of creating the appropriate framework conditions for projects and for programs. Of course, there are also certain issues which can arise with regards to the role of senior management in projects and programs. Senior management can sometimes be overbearing in its approach to the point where it intervenes excessively in a project's operations and management. This is not good. That comes then under micromanagement. That is demotivating, it's discouraging, it can cause confusion, can cause uncertainty. So while senior management must be involved in, sort of playing its role in the projects and the programs, it has to walk a fine line. On the one hand, it has to facilitate, it has to encourage, it has to support, it has to create the requisite framework conditions. On the other hand, it should not sort of intervene too much. It should not always, sort of tell people that, this, do this, run it this way, run it that way, don't do this, don't do that. That should be left to the project manager, should be left to the project team members, it should be left to other stakeholders which are more involved in the daily operations of the project. Senior management's role should be more on periodic monitoring, periodic evaluation. How are the programs doing? How are the projects doing? Are they being successful? Are they performing according to expectation? What issues are there? What problems are there? What complications are there? How can senior management help resolve such issues, problems, and complications? That is where the focus of senior management should be. That, and of course selecting projects and programs, but not micromanaging them, as is unfortunately often the case. Nowadays, there are a lot of tools which are available in project management which can help senior managers in monitoring and in evaluating their projects. There are a lot of technical tools, software programs, for instance, MS Project. MS Project, it has different versions. It's got a standalone version, it's got a enterprise version, which is very useful for the purpose of monitoring and evaluation for senior management. There are also other sophisticated software programs, for example, Primavera, which is also considered to be a top-notch project management software program, albeit also a very expensive one and very difficult to find training resources for that. But MS Project in most cases will suit absolutely fine with regards to projects. There's so much one can say with regards to senior management and its stakes, its interest, its relationships to projects. And I think it's now time to move on. Before I will move on, I've just prepared this illustration for you over here, which points out really what I have said before. At the top, you have got the organization's mission, whether it's a commercial organization, whether it's a public sector organization, you have the mission here at the top. To achieve the organization's mission, that is the ultimate destination where it wants to go, you have to set goals and objectives. Goals and objectives can be short, medium, and long-term, can be also multidimensional. In order to achieve these goals and objectives, you have to set strategies. You have to formulate strategies, you have to evaluate strategies, and then you have to select the most appropriate strategy which you think can achieve the goals and objectives in the best, most effective, most efficient possible manner. And in order to undertake these strategies, you've got programs, you've got projects, and of course you have got the running operations of an organization. So this demonstrates the relationship here between programs, projects, operations, through strategies, through goals and objectives, ultimately to the organization's mission. And as I just pointed out, you know, what senior management all should do, yes, this is their responsibility, and you have it here in this box. The structure, the culture, the resources, knowledge assets, institutional and infrastructural support base, the processes, etc. All these have to be instigated by, with the help of senior management, with their direct support and encouragement and monitoring and evaluation. Let's move on now to another very important stakeholder, the project champion. What does the project champion do with regards to projects? Well, I mean, the name itself, champion, already should give you a hint. Project champion, who champions the project. The project champion performs a crucial supporting function on projects. What the champion does do is, for example, advocate the project to senior management. If there is a good idea for a project, maybe a new product or a new service, something like that, and you have someone within the organization who takes up this idea and who investigates it and thinks, oh yeah, it's very good, and based on the data we have, it's going to bring a lot of value to our organization. What this champion then does is it supports the project, it advocates the project, especially to senior management, who, as I pointed out, is ultimately responsible for selecting, for rejecting projects. The champion's contribution includes ensuring that the project is consistent with the strategic direction, mission, objectives, goals of the organization, and of course that the project benefits exceed the project costs. There's no point in doing a project if the benefits which you are going to get from that project are going to exceed the costs. Then you have a net loss, which does not make sense. And of course it doesn't make sense if you do a project which is not really consistent with your mission, with your goals. You know? If you have a car company, for instance, it would not really make sense if that car company has projects to set up a restaurant chain somewhere. It's not consistent with its mission of dominating or controlling a certain segment of the car market. So the project champion is usually a well-connected and powerful individual within the organization. The more well-connected you are, the more networks you have got, the more status and influence you have got, then the more other stakeholders like senior management are going to take note, are going to take heed of what you are telling them. And you don't only have to have one champion in a project, you can also have several champions, you know, which is better. The more, the better. If you have a number of powerful individuals within the organization, well-connected, powerful individuals who are supporting a project, well, then there is more pressure in order to undertake that project. The champion has other functions, other interests in a project, and the champion also helps in the selection of a project manager, provides direction to the project, and ensures that the project team has the required resources needed to successfully complete the project. So it's not only you advocate the project, but you also have a sort of practical functions in the project, which is, you know, helping out, selecting, providing direction, providing guidance, providing mentoring also, and helping ensure that the resources are available. Projects consume a lot of resources, you know, it's financial resources, material resources, human resources, informational resources, etc., etc., etc. And these resources have to be mobilized. And it needs someone, you know, who can ensure that this mobilization is going to take part. And here, this is where the champion can play an important role. The project champion obtains commitment from the functional resource managers to support the project. They will be providing inputs, and periodically reviews the project status reports and project progress with the project manager. Every project, every program must have a reporting system, Status reports are a very crucial component of this reporting system. It is through the status reports that one can see how the project is doing, whether the targets are being met, whether the timelines are being kept, whether the budget is not being overrun, and so forth and so forth. And the project champion, one of the roles of the project champion is also to look at these status reports, see how things are going, discuss any issues, see how, if there are any problems, how they can be resolved. The project champion helps eliminate obstacles that cannot be overcome by the project manager or by the project team, coaches and mentors the project manager. Because the project champion is probably better connected than the project manager, and the team members, has more access to resources, can be very helpful in this regard when the project manager and the project team are encountering difficulties in getting support, on getting cooperation, on getting the resources which they need in order to undertake the project. Of course, there are certain risks for the project champion. For example, a bad project can blot the champion's reputation. Everyone will say, oh well, you know, this person came, was supporting the project, you know, getting a hold of all the resources, and we have invested so much in it, and now this the outcome of this project really has not contributed anything at all to the project, to the organization. So this is, you know, something which one has to be mindful of. The project champion also is a human being. The project champion can be transferred, maybe retired, might leave the organization while the project is ongoing, which can also cause problems because then the champion is no longer there. So who is going to champion the project now? Might be difficult finding another champion. Might not be so difficult, but who can tell? So that can be an issue, and the project champion initially might be very supportive of the project, but later on might lose interest, might not be so cooperative, or might not be so committed for the project, which is also not good. So there are some risks vis-a-vis the project champion, but there are also a number of helps which the project champion can give. Another stakeholder, the project client. Very important. You know, every project has some kind of client, some kind of owner who owns the project, or who receives the project output or result. Client satisfaction or dissatisfaction is a key project success or failure indicator. Is the client satisfied? Is the client happy? Well, that is one indicator of project success. Is the client unhappy, dissatisfied? That is an indicator of failure. Even if you might have done the project on time, within budget, but if the client is not really satisfied, well, then your project has not been a resounding success. Responsibility lies with the project client to indicate clearly to the project manager and team the needs, requirements, specifications that the project must meet, and to approve and help develop the project scope, plan, and implementation documents. So the client has quite an important role to play. It's not that the client just gives a contract and says, okay, we want such and such product or such and such service. When you finish, come back and we will receive it and we'll look at it and see if it meets our criteria or not. That's not a good approach. What the client has to do is has to be actively involved throughout the project. So the client, as I pointed out, has got many responsibilities. Responsibility also lies with the project client to interact closely and whenever necessary with the project manager and project team throughout the project lifecycle, as I just hinted, and keeping the mutually agreed upon integrated change control processes in mind, communicate on time any desired alterations to the project scope to the project manager and team, as well as consider and, if accepted, approve changes suggested by the project team, project manager. In project management, you study the course module project management, you should come across a process which is called the integrated change control process. Now, projects, when they start, they usually have a certain set of requirements, a certain set of specifications. The scope is derived from those requirements and those specifications. However, over the passage of time, requirements and specifications and consequently the scope of the project can change. It's not static normally. It can change. And that is why there has to be a mechanism which can sort of take into consideration and incorporate this need for change. And that is the integrated change control process, which actually is basically very simple, but there are a number of steps which you have to keep in mind. And sometimes changes can be numerous, sometimes they can be quite infrequent. So it is the project client's responsibility to propose any changes based on changing needs of that client or changing requirements, changing specifications. That is the client's responsibility. And they have to communicate this to the project manager and team. They have to look at the proposed change requests, and then they have to consider them. Well, okay, if you have a plan to build a 6-story building, and now the client comes and says, no, I don't want a 6-story building, I want a 10-story building. Well, that is quite a substantive change request. That has cost implications for the project. That has got schedule implications for the project, and may have risk implications for the project, legal implications, etc., etc., etc. So all these have to be kept in mind. The project client is also expected to provide periodic feedback to the project manager and team, to review submitted project status and evaluation reports, verify that the project work has been completed according to agreement, and evaluate the final project deliverables at the time of project conclusion. So you see there are quite a large number of activities which the client has to engage in. That is the client's responsibility. There are also some issues regarding the stakeholder, the project client. Lack of interest and sustained commitment, changing priorities, and communicational deficiencies. Sometimes, clients, they start off very enthusiastic about a project. They're all the time pushing, let's get the project started, let's discuss the project. And then as time goes by, they tend to become sometimes complacent, and they start to lose interest. Okay, the project is going, yeah, well, when it's ready, great. But that's not good. As I pointed out, the clients have to be constantly involved throughout the project life cycle. You can't be involved at the beginning and involved at the end, but you have to be involved throughout. There has to be this element of sustained commitment. Priorities of the client can change. The project might have been a high priority for them today, and for some reason or the other, it's now losing its priority. Other things have come up, other priorities which require more urgent attention, more pressing attention, concentration of resources, and so forth. Communicational deficiencies, this is always a very big issue. As I pointed out, the projects are based on requirements, they're based on specifications. And these requirements and these specifications, they have to be elicited. There is a whole formal process for that, and there are various ways and means of eliciting requirements and specifications. And if this process is not done properly, then it could be that certain very important requirements, very important specifications might have been ignored, or they have been left out. But these are absolutely necessary in order to successfully complete the project. So there can be communicational deficiencies also in terms of interaction, handing over reports, looking at reports, reading reports, commenting on them, providing feedback. There might be deficiencies which might be taking place over there, miscommunication, lack of communication, non-communication, maybe too much communication, and so forth. And these are all issues with regards to the project client. So one has to be very mindful of these when one is doing projects. Another specific primary stakeholder is the project steering committees. Now, you don't find these on all projects, but often on the larger, more complex, more longer duration, more cost-intensive projects, you will find steering committees. Now, what are these steering committees? Well, they usually comprise key project stakeholders. some having specialist knowledge, expertise and experience. They often include the project manager, and they are chaired by some very senior official. It could be a project sponsor or a senior official from the project owning organization or organizations. It could be a lot of different individuals. The steering committee ideally should not have too many members. It should also have not too few. Usually in project management, in the range of 6 to 10 is considered a reasonable size of a project steering committee. You know the saying, too many cooks spoil the broth, and one doesn't want to have too many steering committee members also, because that can bring issues and problems of its own. But they should be such that these are very important stakeholders who are having some control over key resources like financing, or who have the authority to continue or to discontinue the project, and who are actually managing or administering the project, and who have key roles to play. Some of a project steering committee's typical functions on a project, this is their stakes, their interests, include having responsibility for successful achievement of the project goal and intended outcomes, ensuring the project's consistency with the objectives, goals of the project owning and implementing organizations or entities, periodic monitoring and evaluation of the project, and authorization of significant changes to the project's scope, cost, and schedule. So these are the fundamental functions which they have. These are more sort of overall framework functions, like authorizing significant or major changes to the project's scope, cost, or schedule, monitoring and evaluation function, and ensuring, of course, that the projects are consistent with the organizations on behalf of which the project is being undertaken. There is no fixed model for steering committees that they must have these functions. It all depends. Some committees, they may have very restricted functions. They may act largely in an advisory capacity. There are other steering committees which may have more broader set of powers, more broader set of functions also. And as I pointed out, they can make significant changes to a project scope, cost, and schedule. Project steering committees, they also, if you look at many of them, they often provide guidance to the project manager and project team and resolve problems, conflicts, and issues which are beyond the control of the project manager and project team. Especially when you have large projects where you have got many different stakeholders from different organizations, from different countries, where you are interfacing with foreign governments and so forth. The project manager and the project team, it could be too much for them to handle all the complexities of these interfacing relationships. In this case, a project steering committee can lend a helping hand in helping resolve such problems and conflicts. Project steering committees also can perform a liaising function when necessary with project stakeholders, and they report on the project's progress to the project owner or client. So quite a few functions, and they are a very important institution, but at the same time project steering committees also may have their potential drawbacks. For example, they may become very bureaucratic, which is not good, you know, for a project environment, becoming too bureaucratic. They may also tend to micromanage the project, which is not good. That's why you have the project manager and the project team members and the other stakeholders who are looking after the daily operation work, the technical work of a project. Focus on politics, not on project. Yes, you know, when you have 2, 3 more people, sometimes the political element comes in, everyone vying for favors, everyone vying for influence, everyone vying for prestige, and sometimes the project can suffer as a result. This is not good if the steering committee becomes too engaged in politics. There is a possibility that the steering committee members, sometimes their opinions might diverge quite considerably, and when you have a very significant divergence of opinions, then it's sometimes difficult to achieve consensus. Delayed decision making, taking too much time for decision making, decision paralysis, which is of course not good for a project. these are all some of the potential drawbacks which one can expect to encounter from project steering committees. And what I want to do now is I just want to show you two documents which I have brought from actual projects, steering committee documents, sample documents. We will now review it. One document is from Monash University. I believe it's an Australian university. They have a project steering committee for some project which they are engaged in. It's not important to know now specifically the details of the project or the program, whatever, but it's more important to look and see what kind of roles, responsibilities these stakeholders, this project steering committee have got. And let me now just open the document over here. Yeah, as you can see, it's an 8-page document. Yeah, Government of Tasmania. This is one of the Australian states. It relates, it's a program here, Community Client Health Profile Program. So the details of the program, as I said, are not really so relevant over here. It's a health-related program. That's why it comes under the Department of Health and Human Services of the Government of Tasmania. The terms of reference of the steering committee, let us now look at it. Note over here, this is version 1.2. Documents are also dynamic in project management. It's not that you have a document and it remains static throughout, but you can update the document. And that's why you can see over here, this version 1.2 probably started from 1.0, 1.1, 1.2. The date is 3rd July 2006. Maybe after some months they have updated it, version 1.3, don't know. And then there'll be a new date given over here. There's a nice thing about project management, it is so dynamic. The documents are also so dynamic. You might have created a document and some months or maybe even a year or two down the line might be totally unrecognizable. It might have been updated so much. You can see here the version history. Yes, it starts from 1.1, 1.2, and it also gives here the reason why the version has been changed, why it has been updated. So let us now just browse down a little bit. The primary function of the steering committee for this program is to take responsibility for and address the major business issues associated with the Community Client Health Profile Program, including the approval of budgetary strategy, scope, definition, realization of benefits, the monitoring of risks, quality, timeliness. Role of the steering committee is given over here in this section number 2. The role of the steering committee, now this is from a stakeholder perspective, this is what we are interested in, the roles or the interests of this stakeholder, the steering committee. The role of the steering committee is to take on responsibility for the program, the business plan, and each project's feasibility. Remember, every program is made up of several interrelated projects, so that's why they say here each project's feasibility, implementation plan, and achievement of outcomes. Second role is to ensure the program and each project scope aligns with the requirements of the stakeholder groups. Provide those directly involved in the program and each project, those stakeholders, with guidance on program and/or project business issues. Ensure effort and expenditure are appropriate to stakeholder expectations. Address any issue that has major implications for the program and/or projects. Keep the program and projects' scopes under control as emergent issues force changes to be considered. Reconcile differences in opinion and approach and resolve disputes arising from them. And report on program and projects' progress to those responsible at an executive level, senior management, such as the secretary and the minister. And then it goes on and on and on. Role of individual steering committee members and such and such and such. You can see over here, there are more details are given over here. Monitoring function, approval function, assistance function, conflict and dispute resolution function, responsibility function. And here it gives you in one table the membership of the steering committee, who is, you can see here, the program owner is chairing the committee. Then there are other project owners from other departments. Executive and funding representative, information services, acute health services executive member, external member. So you see, it's a collection of different people, not always from one group or from one organization, but there can be others from different organizations which are playing a very important role, a key role on that project. And then it gives other things here like frequency of meetings, the venue, the quorum, if 5 members agree, okay, the minutes, the proxies, agenda, and so forth, and so forth. So in 8 pages here, you have this terms of reference for the steering committee of this particular program, which is over here. I have also got another one. This is from Monash University. This is the one which I had showed you on the slide. This is here the terms of reference for the project steering committee. Let's look at this one over here. The project steering committee represents at an executive level the critical stakeholder groups, the very important stakeholder groups for the project sponsor and the chair, a group of senior managers who represent the key project clients. So these are the members of the project steering committee. The roles and responsibilities are given over here. The members review and approve the project charter for quality, accuracy, and strength of business case, review progress against the project plan, review and approve changes to the business case, review and approve changes to project resourcing, timeliness, scope, objectives, costs, etc. Make decisions on major priority of deliverables, approve interim deliverables, approves project development strategy, actions escalated project issues, resolve conflicts between stakeholder groups. And then here also some supplementary information is given, the format of the meetings, the frequency of the meetings, a very short document. It's basically just 1 page long as you can see it. So you can have a very short document, you can have a longer document, you can have a more voluminous document depending on what kind of project or program you are engaged in and how complex it is. Everything is possible. There is no fixed template, there is no fixed model. The very nice thing about project management is it's a very, very practical, hands-on subject, as you will also see from your other courses which you are attending. So this was so much for the steering committee, which is a very important stakeholder in projects and programs, which have got some very important roles to play on it. Let me now look at the project finances, which are again another very important specific stakeholder, especially when you have very large projects which require very large sums of money. In the case of context of Pakistan, you have got programs like the Bashar Dam and the Neelam Jhelum and so forth, Iran Pakistan gas pipeline, and the Turkmenistan Afghanistan Pakistan India gas pipeline, etc., etc. You have all these big projects which are in planning or which are under execution, which are costing billions and billions of dollars, which is way beyond the reach of the government of Pakistan, and they have to collect the resources, the funding resources from different agencies, and this is where the project finances come in. For projects, you can have many sources, potential sources of funding. From your organization, for instance, you can have annual budget allocations. You can get funding from municipal, district, state or provincial, national and regional development schemes and programs, particularly in the context of the European Union. There are a lot of these development funding schemes, for infrastructure development for different regions of the European Union, especially for the poorer, more underdeveloped regions. You have got national, regional and international development financing implementing institutions and agencies. At the international level, for instance, the World Bank. At the regional level, maybe the Asian Development Bank or the African Development Bank. And then you have got, within the country, you have got development financing institutions which can provide funding, for example, for industrial programs, projects, or for agricultural programs, projects. Another source of funding is taxes and special purpose funds, which have been set up specifically for certain projects. Intergovernmental loans, export-import and commercial bank lending, venture capital, securities markets where you float bonds or shares in order to raise capital, financial reserves, corporate earnings, sale of tangible assets, like, for example, the privatization program, selling nationalized organizations, using the proceeds then maybe to finance development programs, projects, and grants, donations, contributions from philanthropic and other sources, for example, under corporate social responsibility programs, fundraising events, etc. You know, all these are ways of generating funds, but of course there are stakeholders then who have to hand out these funds, different types of stakeholders. And in the case of lending, for example, by institutional lending, by banks, development financing institutes, development funds, infrastructure funds, the financiers who are stakeholders, they may be interested in a high rate of return on their investment, also at a reasonable risk, or they may not be interested in such a high rate of return, depending on what their priorities are, on what their mission and objectives are. So there are different stakeholders who have got different interests. If it's a commercial lending, then you have a stakeholder who would like to have a high return on its investment and at a low risk. If it's maybe public sector or development agency which is providing funds, then might not expect to have such a high return on investment, but at the same time also would not like to have a high risk on that investment. And of course on projects there can be many risks, and these risks are not static but they change over time, and that can also change the attitude of the financer over time. There was an interesting case a couple of years ago in Turkey. Turks wanted to build a very large dam, Ilusu Dam it's called, and this dam would have caused a lot of problems for the environment. It would have damaged a lot of archaeological and cultural assets because it was in one area which had a very, very old history going back many thousands of years. The financiers were the Austrians, Swiss and Germans, if I'm correct, and because of the immense pressure on these institutions not to provide funding, which I think was quite right, it was quite right of stakeholders to oppose that project, they actually blocked the funding, and the Turks, they had to then look around for different sources of funding. This is a direct example of how stakeholder pressure in this case can influence the funding flows. One example I have brought over here in terms of project financing is the Three Gorges Dam of China. I've also referred to it previously. Three Gorges Dam is the biggest hydroelectric power project in the world, multi-purpose, and has been very controversial inside and outside China. And a lot of stakeholders had to be mobilized in order to fund this project, which was approximately $25 billion. I've also heard estimates of up to $30 billion. It's a very huge sum, and all kinds of funding instruments were used and stakeholders mobilized. And if you want to get more information, then you should click here on this little picture. It will take you directly to a document on the World Wide Web where you can get all the details about the funding and the stakeholders who provided the funding for this particular project. So moving on now from the project financiers to the resource and functional managers. As I pointed out, organizations traditionally have been divided into functional areas: accounting, finance, marketing, production, IT, administration, etc., etc., etc. All of them have their resources and their concentration of expertise and resources. So when a project is being undertaken within an organization, then it needs the input, it needs the support of these different functional areas, which have their own respective managers who are taking care of their affairs. So that is why these functional managers are very important stakeholders, especially in certain organizationally structural environments with regards to projects. Projects can be also undertaken in a matrix environment, and that is something which I really don't want to get involved in now, because there is so much to say about it and we have got very limited time to go through all that. But what I should just point out is that these functional managers or stakeholders, they have got a lot of responsibilities on project. And as I said, resources are concentrated in these functional areas. And so one of their responsibilities is to provide resources. Could be human resources like staff, for instance, their expertise which they have got, which may be full-time, which may be part-time, which may be in a large number or maybe not in a very large number. Keep in mind that at any time many projects will be ongoing simultaneously, and these functional areas, these functional departments, they have to divide their resources accordingly. So many resources for this project, so many resources for that project, and so many resources for this project, etc., etc., etc. Functional managers have an interest, that is their stake, in ensuring that the project work which they are required to support does not interfere too much with their departments or areas' routine operational activities or conflict with their own projects. Projects may be taking place within a functional department. They may be taking place across functional departments, involving 2, 3 or more functional departments. So besides the projects which are within the functional department and across the functional departments also have their routine work, administrative work, paperwork, operational work to do, which is not really project-related work. So they have to, sort of really divide their resources accordingly, can require quite a bit of coordination. So they have got a big stake in all the projects which are taking place, because such a large chunk of their resources are invested in those projects. Some of the specific responsibilities of the functional managers with regards to the projects which they are involved in, whether they are within their divisions or departments or whether they are across, is to review and approve the parts of the project plan which are relevant for their areas of work, provide direction to their staff members who are assigned to the project team. Functional managers are expected to ensure that their staffers, who are working on the projects, possess the requisite skills and expertise and are given time to complete the project work as indicated in the project plan. So the people who are within the functional department, whether they are, for example, production engineers or R&D teams, whatever, or financiers or marketing experts, they have to be given the time in order to complete their project work. They also may be having other responsibilities which is outside the project work. And it's sometimes very difficult, to focus on two major forms of activities, project activities and routine operational activities at the same time. So sometimes this can give rise to conflicts, and functional managers are expected to provide a facilitating environment where at least the project work can be undertaken properly without causing undue complications or delays for the project. Functional managers are also expected to behave in a manner which facilitates the project, as I just pointed out, and where and when possible help eliminate obstacles facing the project. Due to competition for access to limited project resources in the functional areas, because of many projects which are going on in addition to routine activities, dealing with functional managers may require good negotiation, persuasion and interpersonal skills on the project manager's part. Project manager needs resources, it needs people, it needs facilities, it needs infrastructure. And if you have got many projects which are ongoing, well then, it's sometimes difficult to accommodate all the projects. And then in this case, when you are dealing with functional managers, then it's very good on the part of the project manager and the project team when they can have these kinds of skills like negotiation, interpersonal skills, communicational skills to actually persuade the functional managers that what they're doing is very important for the department, for the organization, and that they should be provided with the requisite support, infrastructure, human resources, and so forth. Let us just take a look at this matrix form over here. I have prepared this slide for you. just an illustration to illustrate the concept which is underlying here. Right at the top you have a general manager or senior manager, could be a division manager, whatever, it's a senior executive. On the left hand side of this slide, you can see here vertically you have got the projects. What I call the project level is made up of different projects: project 1, project 2, project 3, project 4, project 5, project 6, etc., 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 up to project N, any number of projects which is ongoing at that particular time. And then here, from the left side onwards, all the way across to the right side, you have got the functional levels. It could be, one could be maybe accounting, one could be IT, one could be perhaps human resources, one could be R&D something. I have just drawn 4 levels over here because the slide does not allow too much space, so this just fits in very nicely. But a projects, they can cut across all functional levels in an organization, and there may be many more than just 4. Now, on the left hand side vertically you have the projects, on the right hand side horizontally you have the functional levels. Now look at these arrows which I have drawn here in different colors in this slide. On the top you have a green arrow which is going from left to right. You have then a purple arrow which is going from left to right. You have then a darker green arrow from left to right, and here you've got a kind of this is a lilac sort of arrow going from left to right. And then you see wherever the project intersects with the functional level, you have got these circles, FI, that is the functional interface, the interface between the project and that particular functional level. Like project 1 interfaces with functional level A. You have got this yellow circle over here. Project 1 interfaces with functional level B. You have got this orange circle over here. Project 1 intersects or interfaces with functional level C. You have this green circle over here, and finally project 1 intersects with functional level D. You have this white circle around here. So every project, in this case I have drawn just 4 boxes to represent 4 different projects. They cut across functional lines. Input comes from, for project 1, takes some input from functional level A, it takes some input from functional level B, takes some input from functional level C, and it takes some input from functional level D. And if you do this for all the projects, then you can see every functional level is involved in providing inputs for all these projects, and if you add them all up, then you can see it's can be quite a bit of resources are required, and so forth and so forth. If you want to look at it more specifically, then you can have a look at this slide over here. And just forget about the terms matrix system at the moment. It's called matrix because it resembles a matrix, but that is a whole subject area in itself. We don't want to go into that. In this case here, I've slightly modified the previous slide, and I have put 3 projects over here: project X, project Y, project Z. PM means project manager, the project manager who's managing project X, the project manager who's managing project Y, and the project manager who's managing project Z. And then I have given here, instead of 4 functional areas, I've given 3 functional areas, and I have named them. One area, let us say engineering; one area, let us say manufacturing; one area, let us say marketing, probably about developing some new product or some new item, some material item here, which then will be sold. With the marketing department comes in, the engineering comes in the development, the manufacturing comes then in the actual making a prototype, and the marketing comes in doing market research and surveys, etc. And each functional area I have broken down into 3 sub-functional areas, 3 specialized areas within that functional area. Can be E1 is a specialized form of engineering, E2 is another specialized form, E3 is another specialized form. All of them come under engineering. The same here with manufacturing, the same here with marketing. And you can see a PA is sort of like a project assistant that you can just disregard for the moment. Project X, the square box on the left, you can see that it interfaces with the engineering functional area. These are these three lilac or purple circles. And with this sub-area E1 of the engineering functional area, it requires two resource units. That could be, for example, two engineers from that particular discipline, which is working on the project, one from the other area and one from the other area. So you could have, say, 4 human resources, 4 engineers or technicians from these engineering functional area, which is working on that project. In addition, 3 persons from this sub-area of manufacturing, 2 from this sub-area of manufacturing, and only 1 person from marketing, maybe someone who is conducting a survey, providing information with regards to the technical specifications of that product, which is being developed as a prototype. So here you can see that this project is taking so and so many resources from these and these and these functional areas at such and such points in time. And of course that can change over time. The same with project Y, project Z. So here a very simplified version, and if you want to make a great detail out of it, you can see then for all the different functional areas and their sub-areas and maybe their sub-areas, and for all the projects at any given point in time, if you prepare an illustration, you can see exactly what resources are needed. And this is where the functional managers, as stakeholders, they have to come in and ensure that these resources are available and can be provided to the respective projects so that they can do their work. You can see here there's a lot of planning is required, a lot of interfacing, a lot of communication, so that everyone is on board. They have to know exactly what is required of them, when it is required of them, in what quantity, in what quality, and so forth, and so forth. So this is very, you could say, complex interfacing taking place over here, which requires very good communication, very good cooperation, and also very good coordination between these stakeholders, the functional level and on the one hand, and the project level on the other hand. And that's it for this lecture. I think we have already gone through quite a bit of material. What we are going to do in the next lecture is we are going to continue on talking about the primary stakeholders. And if you go back to this diagram or this illustration which I had shown you at the beginning of this lecture, you know that there are a very large number of stakeholders, and we have already covered quite a few of them over here, like senior management, steering committee, functional resource manager. And what we are going to do now in the next lecture is we are going to look at the project manager, we are going to look at the project team, we will look at vendors, suppliers, contractors, consultants, and maybe some state and federal government entities if time permits. So thank you very much. That's it for today, for this lecture, and I'll see you in the next lecture.